set of products that have been tailor-made for scalability. In fact, so if I go to the problems that are actually being faced by the ad ecosystem today, the first one would be a lack of transparency and auditability. And all of this has been based on independent surveys that have been created, where there have been studies which show that for every dollar that a advertiser spends, only 50% of that is actually received by the publisher. And the rest of the 50% is kind of going into a black box where it is unaccounted for. Nobody has the transparent view of where the rest of the 50% of that ad spend is going. And it is very, very difficult to even determine the authenticity of whatever data that people are getting access to for the remaining 50%. So there is a lack of transparency and auditability in the advertising ecosystem, which is the number one problem. The second problem is a very, very inefficient supply chain where there is very high transactional cost. And the result, and the reason for this very high transactional cost is because there is a lack of transparency, which is problem number one. People know that they can get away with not sharing the real data, not sharing the data in its entirety that can be relied upon. So the result of that is very, very high transactional fees on various links in that supply chain. The third problem that we have is a delayed payment system where it takes between 90 to 120 days for a publisher to be paid the money that they are owed after the end of an advertising campaign. That is a long time the publisher has to wait in order to get paid. And this is not to say that the advertiser pays 90 to 120 days. They do pay fairly quickly at about 60 days or so, but there is a delay that is introduced by the supply chain, and that is resulting in inefficiencies on the supply side, which is the publishers, and quite a lot of them would then have to cater their websites to have any more number of ads than they would have liked to, because they would like to monetize every inch of space on the website in order to maximize their revenues. So that has a direct impact on the users and the experience that users have on those websites. Finally, there is a lack of assurance. And I know you were talking about assurance where we need to have the confidence that all the processing that is happening within that safe box is actually private. It is being carried on in a way in which it should, and that assurance is currently lacking in the advertising industry. How we are using Miston's suite of products in order to deal with these issues is something that I'd like to delve upon in a little more detail to give a little more context to all of the information that you've provided. You spoke about the first product, which is Suite, which is the accounting system which provides the account book for all of the transactions, and that is being used by Alchemy in order to notarize every ad transaction, in order to make sure that people who are involved in this transaction, whether they are the publishers on the supply side or the advertisers and media agencies on the demand side, they all have a view on a public ledger. So there is no going away from saying that, oh, that is not valid or this is not valid. It is validated, notarized on the public ledger on Suite. So they know they have complete confidence in the data being authentic and the data not being lost. The second is we are talking about scale, and there will be millions or billions of ad impressions that are delivered every day, and each of these ad impressions has value and it has a certain amount of data associated with it. The data enables the media agencies or the advertisers to actually track whether the ad was really shown to the user or not. The data also enables publishers to know how much of money they are owed, how many ad impressions were delivered on their platform, and hence how much of money they are owed. It also allows intermediaries or people who ensure that they facilitate the transaction to determine which campaign spent the money that needs to be paid and which publishers that money needs to go to, what the transaction fees is for people who facilitated this transaction, and how much that transaction fees is, who that should go to. So there's a lot of bookkeeping that needs to happen, and while that bookkeeping needs to happen in an assured way, the data that powers that bookkeeping needs to be available, needs to be reliable, needs to be secure, and we need to ensure that only those people who need to have access to that data should have access to that data, and people who are not authorized to that data should not have access to that data. All of that is very, very important from an enterprise business context. And that is exactly how we are using Walrus and Seal. We are putting multiple ad transactions, ad impressions together into blobs, which are then encrypted using Seal and then stored on Walrus. We know that Walrus is a decentralized storage mechanism which gives us redundancy, which gives us the ability to ensure that this data is not going to be lost. You come the next day and if the data is lost or corrupted, then it leads to all sorts of problems. We know that problem does not exist. We know that that is exactly the problem that Walrus is designed to solve. Seal actually helps us to encrypt each blob in a way that publishers and advertisers who are associated with transactions within that blob are able to encrypt that blob and make sense out of it. So for example, if I were to put all of the ad transactions related to publisher A in a particular blob, encrypt that using a key that is associated with publisher A, then nobody from the public or let's say publisher B should not be able to extract that publicly available blob, decrypt it and make sense out of it. So while the blob itself is publicly available on Walrus, it is not decryptable, or it is not, people cannot make sense out of that blob until they are authorized to do so. And that is a very, very interesting and important concept in advertising, where we deal with not only confidential data related to publishers and advertisers, but there could also be various PII data that could be then encrypted and then stored on Walrus. And there is a lot of PII data in the advertising industry where PII data could be used to enable targeted advertising as well. And that's another very, very important topic where people sometimes don't have the complete confidence that their data is being used in a way in which it was meant to be. The number of times people have just clicked accept all on cookie preferences, where they just want that banner to go away so that they are able to access the content, actually leads to many more problems. That data could land up in the hands of people who use it in different ways, authorized by the user himself or herself because they click accept all. But then we need to make sure that that data that is then captured is used for the right purposes, is encrypted, and it is maintained in the most secure way possible, which is exactly what Seal is giving us. Finally, Nautilus, and that is a product that I'm very, very excited about because there are a lot of potentials, George. I was just a lot of things were running in my mind when we were talking about Nautilus, and there are quite a few scenarios in which we are going to be using Nautilus. The first is in validating the transactions that are being generated by the ad exchange. We need to ensure that each of these ad transactions or ad impressions that are being delivered to the user are valid ad impressions before they are passed downstream. These ad impressions form the source of the data. Now, if an ad impression is not valid, or if that ad was not viewed by a user, then there is no point in charging the advertiser for the delivery of that ad impression. And there are various bots that try to create fake ad impressions. There are websites, fake websites, which try and deliver the ad below the fold so that the user does not see it. There are various ways in which people try to scam the system and try to make a quick buck out of the system. So we need to be in a position where we are able to validate every ad impression and then certify that yes, this is a genuine ad impression that was seen by a genuine user, and hence this particular advertising campaign needs to pay this much of money to this particular publisher in order for that ad impression that was generated. So that validation is at its source, it starts the waterfall of the data processing that needs to happen. And that is a processing that we are going to be running in a TEE that is powered by Walrus. I believe that all of the data that is stored on Walrus, encrypted by Seal, and then notarized on Sui should not just be for the purpose of providing that auditability, but it needs to add a certain business value to everybody involved in that transaction, which is what we are trying to do with our financial reconciliation layer. Now, with this financial reconciliation layer, we will be running a process within a TEE powered by Nautilus, which will then decrypt and read every blob that is stored on Walrus. It will make sure that it analyzes every validated ad impression, because the ad impressions are validated before they are encrypted and stored on Walrus. The blob is read, every ad impression is analyzed, and it provides a report which says, here is the number of ad impressions that were delivered for campaign A. They need to pay X amount of money to publisher P. That report, which says how much of money was spent by each campaign and how much should be paid to each publisher, is a complete financial reconciliation layer that will enable us to make sure that there are complete efficiencies within the advertising ecosystem. Because as I was saying, there is a huge problem of delayed payments. And just this one product of financial reconciliation using Nautilus and all of the data that is stored on Walrus and notarized on Suite is a game changer for the entire advertising ecosystem, where we can reduce the payments now from between 90 to 120 days to 0-day payments. And that is a huge shift in making sure that everybody in the ad ecosystem is not only able to get the benefits of transparent, auditable, assured data, which complies with all of the regulations, which is confidential and secure, and there is a financial reconciliation which enables everybody to derive value instantly. And that is all made possible by the complete set of listed products, including Walrus, Seal, Suite, and Nautilus.
Yes, you touch upon so many things that, of course, seem critical to the advertising industry and are so, but are also common across many other industries. Like, for example, the difficulty we have, broadly speaking, in having, let's say, computers interact directly with money, so that money can operate at the speed that computers do these days and settle not in days, but in seconds, and actually check accounts before settling, because you have to actually make sure that you settle for the right amount. Again, in seconds or milliseconds rather than days, and do audits so that you make sure that the settlement is correct again, right? In, again, milliseconds and seconds rather than days. This is something that the whole of humanity is suffering from. And as you say, this leads to intermediaries that you just have to trust very often. These intermediaries are not entirely transparent about how they operate internally. There are these costs that you don't know why they're going there. Maybe there's a good reason, maybe not, right? And of course, transparency and equal access and the ability for end users, in your case being publishers or advertisers, to actually check what happened. How does it actually cost? Should I do something different, right? Should I optimize in ways that are easier to reason about, is game-changing, right? And of course, at the end of the day, it's not about let's use a technology for the sake of technology, or let's use a particular type of technology like decentralized technologies or blockchains for the sake of that. It really is about lowering down costs, taking out middlemen, making the folks who are still playing some more central functions accountable, and ensuring that everybody understands the rules of the game, understand how to play the game, and is able to optimize and get the best value, right? I think that's the bottom line, and that very often ends up in money being saved, right? And the whole thing being more efficient. While of course the people who have a genuine business either need or provide a business service still make money, right? And are benefiting. Everybody's benefiting from that at the end of the day. But the money really goes where value is, rather than people who are in the middle.
Yeah, that's so true. In fact, we are just in the process of building out another product, which is now and interacting with the team at Mistin Labs and trying to understand all of the products that have been built is a game changer for us, because it has changed the way we've started thinking about how we can leverage all of these products. When we started these conversations, while at that point in time it seemed like, this is going to power the ad exchange, it is going to make sure that we are able to store the ad impressions and do all of the financial reconciliation. There was another very, very interesting product, George, that we were building, which is called the Alchemy Media Buying Platform. And this is an AI-powered platform, which is a one-stop shop for any advertiser or media agency to actually come onto the platform and buy the ad inventory that they want to. This is very similar to somebody going to, let's say, an Amazon and looking for a product. It could be anything, like, for example, it could be a desk that you want to buy, and then Amazon would give you all of the different options to buy a desk and their features, and it would also include an Amazon certified product as well as part of that. So you have a platform, a one-stop shop, where you can actually compare the different products, their features and their price, and then say, I want to spend my money here and not there. And that is exactly the kind of platform that we were building. It is currently under test, and it's called the media buying platform, where advertisers can come in and say, this is my product that I want to advertise. Here's the amount of money that I have. And we will then provide a one-stop shop for them to see which buying platforms, DSPs like, for example, the Trade Desk or whatever else, they will be able to interact with, and what value each of them provides versus the DSA or the demand-side agent that Alchemy has provided. And they'll be able to compare all of them and say that, yes, this is where I want to spend my money based on all the value features. Now, when we were designing and developing this product, we then we are currently developing MCPs in order to provide the functionality or abstract the functionality of each of these DSPs that we are working with. Now, when we were looking at that, the penny dropped for me when I was looking at the design of the Alchemy media buying platform and how Nautilus provides the assurance that is associated with anything running within that EEE. That is when we realized that if all of these MCPs were to then run on Nautilus to provide the kind of assurance that it does, then it would not only be a one-stop shop where people can just go to that portal and then have a list of different options where they want to advertise, but it also does so in an assured manner where all of the impressions that are then generated and facilitated, delivered through this platform would then be automatically notarized on Walrus, would then be automatically encrypted by seal, stored on Walrus and notarized on SWE, and then go through the entire financial reconciliation layer. So that would form the whole ecosystem of the products that Alchemy is building and how that is actually powered by everything that Miston Labs have built. So each of these Miston Labs products in some way are powering everything that we're doing at this point in time. And it's somehow changed the way in which we are thinking about how products are being designed and built within Alchemy.
Yes, and I think you touched, Chandra, on something really fascinating here, which is this the newest revolution, I guess, in our industry, which is AI, right? And to some extent, sometimes I roll my eyes a little bit because, of course, blockchain has a lot of hype around it, had for the last 10 years, and of course now AI is also seen as having a lot of hype to it. But I think that exactly in the way you're describing, to have a practical solution to a real problem, right? There are some general synergies between these two different currents of computing right now, because to some extent AI, being a new way of processing and structured data, is still subject to the universal laws of computing, and the most universal law of computing is garbage in, garbage out. I mean, it's basically you point your AI model to some data that is meaningless and incorrect or fictitious, right? It's not going to be able to draw any meaningful conclusions for your business, for you, or whatever, right? So to some extent, in fact, the more we're able to just throw a bunch of data at AIs nowadays and expect something to be meaningful business-wise or otherwise in return, the more we have to make very sure that the data is correct, but also that the AIs, particularly the modern AIs that are really agents, can then act on the world in ways that are correct. Right? So both the inputs, the models, but also the ways of acting upon the world have to have some layer of correctness, some layer of transparency so that the AI can even reason about what happened. What is the effect of what I did, right? And suddenly that creates a very important synergy between AI and the kind of things we're discussing here, be it blockchain, transparency, decentralization, right? Because of course, if your AI can only interact with a centralized organization that is a black box and doesn't tell you anything about, how to optimize or how to reason about stuff, and then potentially also gives data to mislead your agent into taking actions that, maybe in their commercial advantage, but not yours, right? That would create a fairly meaningless engagement of our society with AI. So I'm very excited actually about the way you have found ways to help your customers combine these two things, right? Like have AIs that act on their behalf, and then using the stack of decentralized technologies we've been talking about to really ensure that these AIs are acting on their behalf and not on behalf of someone else, or not on erroneous data or incorrect data. I think that this is really a gold standard in some ways in engineering such systems.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. It is so important to have assurance that the data that we are operating on is valid data, is accurate data, and hence the results that come out of all of the processing of such data is valid and believable. So that is such an important point. George, I have one other question as well for you, because we've been using all of these products from Miston Labs, and it always raises a question in my mind as to what next. What is that one product, or maybe more products, that you are looking forward to roll out from Miston Labs? Would you be able to spill some beans on that?
Yes, I mean, to some extent, some of the roadmap we have ahead of us is fairly public, and I'm not going to surprise anyone here. I mean, the next stop for us is indeed the mainnet and full launch of Seal. Right now, Seal is largely on testnet. You already have some previews, of course, working with us, and you will be using it as soon as it is in our mainnet. But understanding the need for confidentiality that organizations building on decentralized systems have, and providing credible ways for them to get what they need in terms of confidentiality is a long-term plan of ours. So that's Seal is the first move we do. Nautilus is also part of that, but we're planning to expand our thinking around this question of combining decentralization, transparency, but also confidentiality. So that's a theme that I think people should expect to see a bit more on. Broadly speaking, another great opportunity of the next maybe a couple of years is the fact that these technologies, blockchains, stablecoins, tokens, they're entering the mainstream. And so we have increasingly organizations that are very traditional, either from the financial sector or the broader financial sector markets, be it energy markets or advertising markets, etc., right? That approach us and they're like, look, we understand that there has been a step change in technology. These blockchains are not anymore science experiments and toys. They are really ready for industrial applications. So that's one side of the equation. We also hear from governments that they're okay to use, right? Because up to now, I would say governments have been a bit ambivalent. They've recognized maybe some potential, but also there were some roadblocks in really reputable organizations really being able to issue assets and handle assets, etc., right? Now, these roadblocks are slowly going away, and we're entering a place where, as a reputable organization, you can handle these things and you can use them to make your operations more efficient and more secure. So we have a lot of kind of inbounds from people who are like, okay, how can we onboard? How can we use these for our businesses, right? And that's quite a different segment from the markets that traditionally blockchains have been looking at, which are actually quite end user in some ways, or sometimes very internal to blockchains, right? A lot of the blockchain money was used to invest in blockchain projects, to build infrastructure and other things, right? Now we're actually starting to see infrastructures that really speak to end user needs. But that is going to be a challenge, right? Because still our industry, even though infrastructures are ready for prime time, needs that extra stuff that traditional companies need in order to onboard any technological change, right? So we are going to see a bit more of that kind of glue between the kind of deep tech, deep infrastructure work that we've been doing, and some kind of on-ramps, if you want, technologically, but also financially onto that technology that are easier to digest for folks who don't want to have their own deep tech team, etc., like you do, right? So that again will have to be another theme of the next 2 years, initially focused on financial and related to financial industries, but then eventually focused on other things like games, content industries, again, where money and other computing things are interacting, but in quite different ways than finance and assets.
In fact, you bring a very good point about development and how developers should approach this. What would be the one piece of advice that you would give for projects or builders who are trying to build on the Miston Labs suite of products? Where do they start, and where would you point them to in their journey of building their product using all of the wonderful technologies that have been built by Miston Labs?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question, and I think that for many developers, starting a journey on building on blockchains is a scary prospect. I think to the first thing that I would like to make very clear is that it's still very early, right? Of course, there have been lots of science experiments in the last 10 years. In the same way as, in the early 80s, I guess there were many computing infrastructures in the 60s and the 70s. That does not mean that, everything has been done and now it's too late, etc. I think the world is for the taking. Right now, the actual things that run on blockchains are very limited. Most of the world does not actually use blockchains. And we believe most of the world will use things like blockchain. So I think the first advice I would give to a developer that maybe is listening to us here is like, just do it. Just do it now. You're still very early. The computing industry is, the blockchain industry is what the computing industry was in the late 70s, early 80s. The world is for the taking. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that very often developers feel like, look, there is a lot of complexity. There's this blockchain. There are smart contracts. There are, different languages there that I have to use, different concepts, etc. And there I would basically point out that one can build a very meaningful, very valuable, very often, experiences on a modern blockchain like Sui or on a modern decentralized store like Walrus without actually writing any smart contracts, with using what developers would now consider traditional Web 2-like technologies and APIs. Because at the end of the day, what blockchains do and what these decentralized stores do today, at least, is sure, they do actually have a common layer of accounting books or storage, but there is already so much activity there that you can just create an application that accesses what's there and build markets, build content, experiences, social experiences on that stuff, pretty much without writing actually a smart contract. Like it's already quite far into a project where you probably will want to start experimenting with that. So even a developer with a Web 2 kind of like traditional web kind of like API, JavaScript, TypeScript background can already start doing very meaningful things that are very badly needed, without any additional knowledge. So I think the best advice is just go to the Hello World example, clone it, and start playing with it. It's not actually that different from client server, except that the server is on a decentralized infrastructure rather than a single server and guarantees you that things are happening correctly. So that's the advantage without much more complexity.
Absolutely, and as a development team that have used the Miston suite of products, I must say that I've been very, very impressed with the level of documentation that is available, the level of support, and even the approachability that we had to the team, where we were able to get quite a lot of our questions answered, to get access to certain best practices. It has been an absolutely wonderful experience building on top of every Miston Labs product, George. And I must thank you and the entire team at Miston Labs for creating this wonderful set of products that enables users like ourselves to solve real-world problems, to make sure that we are able to add value to every one of our users who use these products. So thank you very much, George, for coming into this podcast and sharing your wonderful thoughts with us. Just before I close, George, I just want to tell everybody who's listening in that Alchemy is going to be making a complete move to Sui, the entire set of Miston Labs products, and we will be going live on the 19th of August. 19th of August is a big day for everybody here, and it will mark the beginning of the ad exchange using Sui, Walrus, and Nautilus. Seal will come later once it is launched on the mainnet. We are already testing with Seal on the testnet. We're looking forward to launching as a mainnet launch partner for Seal as well. We will also be launching a new token, which is called the Alchemy token, ALKIMI, which is a Sui-based token, which is going to be launched on various DEXs and centralized exchanges as well. Please do look out for that, and I would look forward to all of you becoming part of the Alchemy family and the extended Sui family as well. George, thank you so much for all of your time and the wonderful ideas that you've shared. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chandru. It's always a pleasure working with your technical team, and we love also the business vision. So we really hope that